So we're on the final straight, which is really cool, and I have the gold and the silver and all the other Black Templar on the harpies and stuff all done. So let's have a look at our gold. And that is very, very bright, isn't it? But I think it works well. It really makes the blood look very punchy, but don't worry, there'll be more punch to come for that. Further on down, I think these two are turning out great as well. Actually, on a note on this lady's robe here, or on her cloak, that's about another 2 or 3 layers of Magos purple over the shish purple. So that has warmed it up a little bit. It still looks a little dark, but I don't mind it being darker around this edge here because it looks more like blood has soaked into the material itself. That's my excuse anyway. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. Totally understand. Further down then, on the wheels, we have the gold. Amazing looking hubcaps, very bling. And we have the silver on the spikes and the band in the middle, as well as the chain, which has been done in lead belcher too, and some of the gold applied to the front and the spikes. So it's time to start dulling down everything, and I think we're going to start with the gold. I really want the gold to look a bit duller, more dull. So we're going to work with Skeleton Horde. We've worked with this before, so we're going to work with it again. It's just to kill the shine, the upper high shine of it a little bit. So let's get some of that onto my palette, and I think we'll start with a wheel just to see what sort of effect we're going to get out of this. So let's check this out and see what happens. I think if we apply this pretty heavy, it'll shade this down quite nicely and just kill a little bit of that tint, or just a little bit of that bright reflectiveness. Because I don't necessarily want this to look clean and bright and shiny. I need the gold to come down a little step to sort of match in a little bit more with how dark and how gritty everything else has turned out. So we're going to keep going with this. Okay, so something like that. That's going to dull that gold down quite nicely when you compare it to the back wheel that has just the gold. I think that's going to look quite good. Let's try one of the figures as well. So let's look at these two at the front here, and let's start with her. I think it's going to work very well on her headpiece in particular, because you see how much it's defining the shadowed areas. I have to be careful here as well. We don't want it to get onto areas that we don't want it on. So we definitely don't want any of it on our skin. Want to keep that skin a bit tidier looking. But we definitely want it on what I'm going to assume is a thong, but it's also holding her loincloth. Around to the side a little bit. We're going to take it up as far as the wrist and the hilt of the sword, because if we take it any further than that, it's going to ruin the effect that I want to get on the blades, which will be I'll do shortly here. So I think that's going to turn out quite well. The more sort of detail and stepping and stuff that's in on the part, the better contrast paint works for you. So, and there is definitely no lack of detail on this model in general, never mind just the two figures here. So yeah, I think this is going to work out quite well. Try and catch this boot here as well, see if we can get her back into focus. Okay, so at this point I'm going to push on with this. We'll do a bit more just to show how this is going to turn out. Hopefully this will look pretty good too. And with the gold paint being a bit of a, being a gloss paint, you can see the contrast paint immediately does want to get into those recesses and sit in there. So that is going to give us the definition that we need on the gold detailing. So at this stage now we can see what the gold has done with the Skeleton Horde contrast paint, and it's dulled it down quite nicely. Now there is going to be a step where we're going to hit it with Citadel Munitorum varnish, which is sort of the satin varnish. That's just to protect all the contrast paints that we have used, because it will rub over time. You want to just make sure that that's settled. Anyway, that's how our gold has turned out so far. So the next thing I want to do is look at our swords, which I've just broke one of. I heard a little, and I was like, oh no. So let's quickly fix it. It's this one here. It's broken a couple of times already, so let me just get a touch of super glue into that. God, for goodness sake. I can never win, you know. Oh no. Okay, no, we're good. We're fine. Right, so we're going to look at the swords. I think we're going to start with her sword up here on top, because we've broken one of the other ones. And I'm just going to add a bit of Magos purple to those. Just a little bit of that, just to tint it, because I want them to clearly not be made of gold. I want them to have a sheen of something. So we can always work on this a bit more. What I'd ideally like to do, I'll maybe actually do it towards the end, is once I have the Magos purple down, I'd then get a bit of Necron compound, the dry paint, and just dry brush that blade a little bit and make it stand out a bit more. I put the idea in my head now, so I think I'm going to do that as well. But meantime, we'll just get a little bit of Magos purple down onto the blade. Again, it's more a step to bring the shape of the sword out and just make it look a little unusual. And I will say, yeah, for certain, I like that, and I will put a silver dry brush over that. I will put some Necron compound on that. Okay, so let's go down to the other two. Of course, there are other ways to do this, you know. Other painting techniques are available. I think that's going to be my tagline from now on. Anytime I go to do something, other painting techniques are available. Right, that's enough for the swords. And the next thing I want to do is get some dark wash down onto our silver. So for the dark, we're going to be doing Null Oil, which is just the simple Citadel shade. And we're going to be putting that over the chains, and we're putting that over the metallic parts, the silver metallic parts of the wheels. So let me get this to the side here, and let's do some chains first. Let's take a little cluster of chains in the middle, make sure I'm in focus. Make sure there isn't too much wash on my brush. And while I'm doing this, I'm also going to explain the next step. So the next thing is I'm going to glue everything together. I'm going to put all the harpies on, I'm going to put all the slaves on, and then going to take it outside, and I'm going to give it a coat of the Munitorum varnish, so that when we come back after this stage is done, the model is completely together. I'll let you have a look at how all the parts come together, what it looks like as a whole, and we'll wrap the video with doing the final blood effect on the top on the cauldron. So yeah, so we'll just continue on with this. I'll do one of the wheels here now under camera as well, just so that I'm not missing something on purpose. And yes, I'm being quite heavy with the wash. I do understand that, but I mean, if you want to bring it back, you can always dry brush, or you can choose a different color. This is just what I fancy going for, just to make the metal parts look rather heavy, because the gold really makes the miniature lighten up a little bit, but I still want to have that difference in materials sort of showing. And of course, everything I could be saying is just completely rubbish, you know. I'm just enjoying painting this. So the miniature has been taken out, been matte coated, all the stuff's been glued onto all the harpies and the slaves and stuff. And I am going to say right now, if you're planning on using this in an army, base it. Absolutely 100% put it on a base, and put it on a large base as well, because you really don't want, when this is being transported around and stuff, you really have to pack it carefully, and a big base will help you do that, because this is going to be fragile. This, if it's not on a base, it will be fragile. I would almost say prohibitively fragile as well, because let's lift it up here and show you under camera what I mean. So here's all our harpies and stuff. I mean, there's no doubt that this has a real epic, evil feel to it, with all the harpies in place. But as we move down, you have the two other harpies here at the front. We then get down to here, and you can see these two slaves sort of hanging free in the breeze. But it gets worse, because you have these ones on the sides, and if I can very gently manipulate it further around, there's 4 more at the back, which all of them only have 1 glue point. So you have to be very, very careful if you have this miniature, or planning to buy this miniature. You need to be aware that you will have to base it if you plan on using it in any sort of army or collection. So there is absolutely no doubt in my mind that this is a gorgeous piece, but you've got to be very aware of how fragile it's going to be once you glue it all together. However, it does also justify my decision to build it and paint it in separate parts and then bring all those parts together at the end, because really you couldn't have done this with the whole model built. You already noticed that I've broken a sword on camera and then had to fix it. If I had to do this with all the harpies and stuff glued on, I don't think this would have been a project that would have been entertaining to watch. It would have been very difficult to show what I was trying to do, and overall a very complex piece to have worked around without breaking stuff more frequently. Anyway, that said and done, I did say there was one more spot I wanted to do. I'm not going to do the dry brush and the swords. I think that's taking one particular detail further than I've taken the rest of it. So that's where I'm going to leave it with the swords anyway. We can always go back to it and do extra highlighting and shading and stuff if we want. Remember, I'm trying to make this model look completely painted to a certain level, and then you can take it and play it, or you can stare at it for a while and wonder what you're going to do next, that sort of stuff. There's tons and tons you can do. So the last thing I want to do is just make the blood look a bit more shiny. And for that, I'm using Green Stuff World True Blood. This is a very interesting compound. It ends with a gloss finish, and that's exactly what I want on the top. Because we've satin varnished with the Citadel stuff, our blood, yeah, it's looking good, but it doesn't look like blood at the minute. It just kind of looks, what's the easiest way to put it? It just looks too flat. There's no texture, there's no depth. So the True Blood, if I pour some out onto my palette here, and just pour some of it out, but you know, even at that point, it looks like actual blood, which is a bit concerning. Green Stuff World, what are you doing out there? But as an effects paint, I think it's going to work very well for the purpose we need it, which is obviously to create a more realistic blood effect. So let's make sure there's nothing on that brush. That's fine. And when I spread it out, you can see it actually is quite gelatinous. It is quite gloopy, which is great. And let's start applying our blood effect. So what's great is it doesn't matter so much if we get it into places we don't really want it to, because it looks like it sort of tide marks a little bit. And in hindsight, this is something I really should have done before gluing everything else onto the miniature, but at this point, I'm content to get this step done and be happy that we have it done. So we're going to see how this interacts with the work we've already done as well, which is going to be interesting. I've not used the blood effect before, so this is me sort of adding this on the fly and hoping that it will complement the contrast paint work that we've previously done. It is very goopy. I have to admit, I quite like that too. It means I can run it up the edge of the cloak a little bit too. And it might aid with that soaking in effect, that kind of damp material I'm trying to go for on the edges of her cloak. So. Now this acts like a glaze, like an enamel, or, well, it's an acrylic, but it acts like a glaze. It's just a very thick glaze, and I'm certainly not complaining about that. I think this is going to look really cool. Because what it's doing right now, as I'm seeing it settle, it is complementing the contrast paint work very nicely, and it's giving me that real deep arterial look to it. And I think as a final step, if you want something to draw the eye in, this is definitely going to be one of the details I would consider doing if you're making this model for yourself. It's also going to make me experiment with these blood effects a bit more, I think. But then there's always a point where you think, well, is this effect gaining me anything, or is it just an addition because of the sake of it? Like, there is points where I think, you know, on swords in particular, hey, that's a bit too much blood on that sword, or, you know, it depends. It's really personal taste and what you think you want from it, so. I don't mind taking it over the edge a little bit and maybe taking it up her hands and her thighs a little. That is going to look pretty good. Even if those bubbles don't go away, I think that's still going to look very nice when it's done. And it is complementing the contrast paint work. I can't tip it too much now because there's quite a lot of the effect down. So that has really livened up the blood effect from the contrast paints. So if you fancy doing something like that, I think that's definitely a way to go about it. Now, that's the model finished to this standard, to this level. I'd be happy to put this down on a table and play with it as part of an army. And what I want to enforce with these tutorials is that this is only the first step. If you feel like you want to add more detail, if you feel some of the things I've missed out should be painted, absolutely fine, we can go back in and we can do that. I always want to leave the miniature in a way that it has what you want for tabletop, and if you want to take it further, there's plenty of scope for you to do that. Covering the main colours, covering the shading where needed, a little bit of highlighting. Contrast paint has worked remarkably well with this too, and a little bit of traditional painting with the metallics really brings it all in and gives you something you can set down on a table and go, yeah, it's where I want it to be at the minute, and if I want to turn it into more of a display piece, I can. I know the steps that I can take from there. So I don't want to preach at you. Please, I apologise if you think I'm preaching too much. I'm just trying to reinforce what my thoughts are on these tutorials as I move on further and do some other ones. I like that sort of, I'm not like some of the other YouTube painters because they are superb people, really good high-end, high-quality stuff. And I always feel that sometimes that's a bit intimidating. So preaching over, that's where I want to fit myself in painting-wise. There's other people up here. I want to be down here a little bit because it's a comfortable level to paint at. Anyway, guys, this has been a heck of a project. If you want more information, please check out Raging Heroes. They have a vast range of stuff, which are all very interesting miniatures. They'll complement your armies well. They can create a force of their own as well, too, if you want to do that. So, again, thank you so much for watching and tolerating me for the past however long this has been. And take care of yourselves, and I'll see you all again next time.